Welcome back to Driving Success, a Fleet Advantage podcast, a show where we bring you expert insights and the latest trends going on in fleet management and transportation. I'm your host, Tracy Derival, and today we have an exciting and informative episode lined up for you. During episode 2, we covered all things full-service lease versus unbundled lease. Today, we're bringing you part 2 and building on that discussion, helping you understand what maintenance options are available when deciding to unbundle your lease next. We are very excited to introduce our guests from FleetNet America by Cox Automotive, Paul Gildenhorn, Brian Welke, and Jeff Werstak. They're here to share their insights on how to optimize fleet maintenance post-unbundling with the added flexibility and benefits of a nationwide maintenance network. So let's start the episode. Paul, Brian, and Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you each briefly introduce yourselves and also explain your roles at FleetNet?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Paul Gildenhorn. I'm the Senior Director of National Sales. Under me, I have our enterprise team, national sales team, and inside sales team, along with sales operations.
And then my name is Brian Welke. I'm a senior account executive. Report to Paul within FleetNet.
And I'm Jeff Werstak. I am in business development, handling some of our largest national accounts for the wrench turning piece of the fleet services by Cox Automotive, and have dealt with the fleet and maintenance space for at least a couple of decades.
Again, we are so happy to have you guys on. We're going to go ahead and start the episode. So we are aware that FleetNet offers a range of maintenance solutions for fleet. Can we hear some of the key components of your maintenance program and how do they help fleets manage their vehicles effectively?
Great question. I would say a couple things. First off, maintenance includes emergency roadside. So when you get a maintenance solution, you also get 24-hour, 7-day-a-week emergency roadside that goes along with that. But when you dive specifically into the maintenance solution, I think one of the most important components of it is a dedicated performance manager. And this is somebody who's focused on looking at trends and diving into the data to improve the maintenance and improve your uptime. Another really important component, and you'll probably hear me talk about this a little bit more, is the auditing process that goes through. In the maintenance program, it's all about accountability. So it's important to audit the invoices for accuracy and compliance, making sure service providers are doing what we've asked them to do and nothing more, nothing less. But also people make mistakes. They fat finger things. So we want to look at those invoices to make sure there's not an extra zero or something before we send an invoice on to a customer. And then another really important piece of the mobile maintenance, and this really helps differentiate us, is the mobile maintenance. Because mostly you think about having to go into a shop, drop it off, leave it there, come back days later. 90% of the work that we do on equipment is on site using mobile maintenance, mobile mechanics. They go on site, they make sure they can do all of the work that can normally be done in a shop, light work. They're not going to do heavy engine work or anything like that, but you think about tires and preventative maintenance and minor mechanical, all of that stuff can be done on site when the truck is not moving. And that's really important when you're thinking about a good maintenance program. And so between the auditing, the DOT approved electronic equipment files, all of those things play into a great maintenance solution.
All right. That's really insightful. It's very clear that your maintenance solutions are definitely designed with like flexibility and efficiency in mind. Speaking on flexibility, when an organization has transitioned their transportation fleet to an unbundled lease, what are the primary benefits that they can expect, especially regarding to maintenance and repair?
Two things come to mind, and Jeff and Brian may have more, but the first thing is complete transparency. The fleet has access to all the data, not just select data, so they can see not only the work that FleetNet does, but also the service provider themselves. So they have access to the service provider's invoice, all of the pricing, the coding, the VMRS coding. So everything that a fleet needs to make solid maintenance decisions, they have at their fingertips. Nothing is hidden. And then the second thing that they can expect is improved uptime. Again, I talked about mobile maintenance and doing that on site while the truck is down. Fleets will reduce the number of days that they're down just by having us come on site and do that maintenance when the truck's not running.
Yeah. And to piggyback off what Paul said there too, a lot of it's around the optimization of your asset. So if it's able to be used in, I would say, more on a daily basis versus being down for days at a time in a shop, allows it to do what it's supposed to, generate your revenue. So overall is uber important to have the vehicles in full cycle, moving and accessible for the fleet, more or less, to use them and generate revenue, which is part of the maintenance department's team, right?
And I'll add on a little bit more to that, to the transparency piece, where while there is visibility to specifics surrounding fleet maintenance, FleetNet has the capability to provide that in a digestible format, so to make it very easy for a fleet manager of one of our customers. So they're actionable items they can take on any improvements that might need to be made.
Now, to continue to dive deeper into the topic, I wanted to piggyback off of one of your key components. How does having a nationwide network of service providers, how does that complement the flexibility of an unbundled lease?
That's a really good question, because first off, knowing who to call and who not to call is really important, right? So understanding and working with our service providers on ranking them and perform their performance, and working with them to make sure that they understand how they're performing in our eyes and what our expectations are of them. And we actually take the time to have a business review with our service providers to help improve their performance. And so working with them hand in hand and allowing them to see how they fare in FleetNet's eyes also positions them better in our network. But having 65,000 active service providers across the U.S. and Canada, there's great coverage. So where there's generally a fleet location, we're going to have a service provider that can service that. And that's real important, because when you think about having a brick and mortar shop, you have to drive to that shop, and that shop isn't always going to be close. But having mobile service mechanics and service providers across the country to be able to support our fleet customers, it gives peace of mind knowing that there's somebody out there and they're going to do good quality work and be held accountable. And so that's the second really big component, is accountability. We expect our service providers to perform at a high level. And if they're not performing at that high level, we're going to work with them to try and improve that. But more importantly, if they're not performing at that level consistently, we will find somebody to support that customer who will perform at that high level. And so we're not tied to, one specific location, because if that location isn't doing the job for you, you're stuck with it, right? With us, you're not. We'll work with our fleets. We'll help them improve. But at the end of the day, if we can't do that, then we're able to find somebody who is. And then I would say lastly, aside from your maintenance type of repairs, there's also your tire repairs, your windshield repairs. There's other repairs that are outside the normal maintenance that you're not going to take it to, a brick and mortar shop. You're going to have multiple types of service providers to be able to support a location. And we have those in our network.
Yeah, that flexibility is very important. And for the fleets out there that are listening, they know that they may have a unique circumstance. Everything is not necessarily a cookie cutter. And when fleets make a transition to a FleetNet program, they have that flexibility. And once again, FleetNet makes it that one-stop easy button, because they're the ones that are managing all of these loose ends to make it easy for the end user and the customer and the fleet.
Now, speaking on making things easier for the customer, I want to address costs, right? With rising operating costs and increased maintenance expenses, how does FleetNet maintenance program address these challenges and provide cost-effective solutions?
Another good question. I mentioned this earlier, that audit process, right? So that audit process allows us to look at what we're expected, the repairs that we were expecting, and also the cost of those repairs, and audit that against what it should be. We use Mitchell 1 for standard repair time and audit every single invoice that goes through that program. And then secondly, we have competitive rates with our select service providers, including Fleet Services, who does a good portion of the work for us.
And I would add, you're also avoiding unnecessary services that may be bundled up in this full service lease. There may be the cost of paying fuel island attendants that you may never use, wash bays that are just not practical for a specific fleet. And so by being able to carve that, those are all baked into a monthly fee, and you get the customization through those points of what you're actually going to be using at when you use it. For instance, the robust warranties that are offered by the manufacturers when a vehicle is new, there's not a lot of repair work that needs to be paid for by the customer. FleetNet can help exercise and maximize those warranties that are out there already, whereas in a lease situation, you have a flat fee that once again, it's all buried in the monthly fee.
Yeah, to your point, Jeff, it's, especially if you're receiving new equipment, you're paying more or less that fixed cost from when it's brand new to maybe 7, 8 years old till you transition into a new one. Well, we all know, being in this industry for quite some time, minus your standard PMs, usually in those first couple of years you have a new Class A truck, there should not be much outside of a warranty that needs to be repaired. So your expenditure, your maintenance expenses at that time are minimal. It's the standard stuff to keep it up and running in a healthy way to maintain warrantable items to be warranted. So from a cost savings, you're only spending at will what you need, especially while the vehicle is still young.
I got to add more, because that asset preservation is essential from the get-go. And once again, peace of mind for the customers that FleetNet will be monitoring that up front so that the vehicle is maintained properly, so that when the warranties do expire, those costs are minimized. And that's all reviewed on quarterly business meetings.
Now, with all of that information in mind, can we hear some examples where your maintenance solutions have significantly benefited fleets transitioning from a full service lease to an unbundled lease?
Well, I would say probably one of the biggest things that come up when you're talking about that is the need for a rental, right? So let's dive into why somebody needs a rental, right? They need a rental because it's taking so long for the repair to get done. They drive it to the shop. It sits there for a couple of days so they can fit them into the schedule. They get the work done. May need some additional repairs. That truck is then down 3, 4, 5, 6 days before the fleet gets it back. Well, the fact that we can go on site while that truck is not running, and that could be in the middle of the night, do the work on the equipment. So when the driver comes in the next morning, that truck is ready to go, and you've just drastically reduced the need for a rental, but 2, you've just reduced the need to have that truck sitting for longer than it needs to. It can be generating revenue, which is why the fleet owns the truck to begin with. Secondly, it allows for more flexibility with service provider selection, right? Because again, you're stuck with 1 or maybe 2 locations, depending on the market that you're in. Well, because we can have Fleet Services, we have other service providers, we can be very flexible in who we select in a particular market and get the right service provider for the fleet. It has to be a good fit, not just for the fleet, but for the location itself. And then it goes right back to transparency. Fleets rely on the information, the data that they get to make informed maintenance decisions. Well, they don't always get that with a full service lease, because a lot of those costs are hidden or baked into the lease or the maintenance portion of it. With FleetNet, you have complete transparency. You see the true cost of the maintenance over the life cycle of the entire unit. So now, as a maintenance leader, you can make better decisions, more informed decisions, because you have all the facts in front of you.
And to Paul's point right there, a lot of it is not necessarily within a full service lease, you're empowered to make decisions on your own. You had to follow a rule book that was set by your leasing agreement, right? So at the end of the day, when you consult with them, one, not only by Paul's point, the local service provider who's going to be there day to day, but then when you have extended or outside the normal maintenance practices, other options in the market, but you consult with them too. What's the right program look for you? And we can pivot and benchmark against like fleets throughout the country based upon all of our data that we've collected over the years, and make not only recommendations but consult and make the fleet themselves feel more empowered on making decisions, interval decisions, and it just makes them feel like they're actually more in control of their maintenance program at that point.
I'll also add on, because there are so many benefits that our customers enjoy when they make this transition. And in many cases, Paul had touched on rental, which involves a truck. And if we're talking about Class 8 trucks, drivers they prefer to stay in their own vehicle. And we all know that drivers are the lifeblood of any sort of transportation organization, and keeping them happy is essential. So keeping them happy, keeping them in their own truck by making it more readily available, increasing not only the utilization on the vehicle, just keeping the drivers happier as well. And a happy driver means that's a happy transportation manager when they have less complaints coming out of a very needed component being people in that organization. Excuse me, choked up about
No problem. I know that we covered a lot. Now I want to look ahead, right? What are some future trends or innovations in fleet maintenance should companies be aware of just to stay ahead of the industry?
Great question. The first thing that comes to mind for me, technician shortages. That's still driving a lot of decisions that fleets are making. It's a very real problem, and it's only continuing to get worse. And that's why fleets are coming to us to help them with their maintenance. Staffing a shop, trying to hire, it costs an enormous amount of money to hire one technician, and they're hard to come by to begin with. So finding a way to augment staffing in order to get a high PM compliance is pretty important. And then the other thing is electrification and alternative fuels. The industry's come a long way in the past decade, but we still have a long way to go. Fleets are making investments in equipment, making sure that there's a plan to maintain the equipment is both in the shop and over the road is important.
I would say there's also a compliance piece that's really gaining a lot of steam starting from the West Coast. And it's we're starting to see more interest in regulations and regulatory rulings come through that are affecting fleets. And it's a big piece as far as in the state of California, there are already California bid inspections, but there's also emissions. What FleetNet does and through Fleet Services is we continue to gear up to give, again, that customer peace of mind that we can make sure that their vehicles are staying compliant by those national rules and regulations. It's a big piece, and it's there's a little bit of a lot of concern in some cases of where this is going to take effect and when it's going to take effect. And again, the FleetNet program can not only help guide through that, but can also help make sure that we're doing as much of that on site as possible. Once again, keeping that utilization high.
And now I'll just add one last piece is, when you look at future state, well, I think everybody hears the word AI quite a bit, right? Artificial intelligence. Well, within the Cox Automotive organization, some of the things that we're doing and we've been doing for quite a long time before AI was a big buzzword is capturing data, understanding what that means, and then turning it back into informative information. In hindsight, as we look in the future, a lot of it is how can we predict and understand and to tool and prepare service providers in the market the best way possible. And what I mean by that is when gathering information from a fleet, have it just be a breakdown event. But as we know that based upon it was a 2022 XYZ OEM, so on and so forth, and we typically was this fault code that came through, well, 93% of the time it goes into this bucket or this bucket. So when we contact the service provider to get that vehicle going back up again, they're tooled and prepared in a more efficient and effective way to get to the side of the road, get them up and running. And it just, the overall experience is much greater and it's quicker, faster, and we're all about times, just like some of our deliveries. I really want that t-shirt. Well, I want it here tomorrow. Well, the same thing, Jeff's point earlier about keeping drivers happy. they want to get up and running. They don't enjoy being on the side of the road that much as well. So that's a huge part of where we see the future going to, is a lot of using the data that we already have, and let alone what we capture today, and making our service providers even more effective in the future.
That is some great information. Paul, Brian, and Jeff, thank you all again so much for coming on today's show and just sharing your insights. I really did enjoy this conversation. You guys all provided some really valuable information on how fleets can optimize their maintenance post unbundling. Thank you again for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
We hope you found today's episode to be helpful and that you took away some good information on what maintenance solutions you have when transitioning to an unbundled lease. So continue to stay tuned for more episodes as we continue to explore the latest trends shaping the industry. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share, and leave a review while you're at it. You can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms such as Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. You can also watch this episode on our social media platforms such as YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Until next time, let's continue to drive solutions together.